Did he ever feel peace? Did the man who had everything, the fame, the money, the adoration of millions, ever find a quiet moment for his own soul? When he was alone in the dark, after the applause faded and the lights went down, was he just a scared boy from Tupelo, Mississippi, still mourning the twin brother he never knew? When he sang gospel songs late into the night, surrounded by his closest friends, was he performing or was he praying? Number 19, was he trying to convince himself he was worth saving? Elvis spent over $500,000 on cars for friends, family, and even total strangers in his lifetime. In 1976 alone, he spent over $140,000 at a single Memphis dealership. He once tipped a Denver police captain with a Lincoln Mark IV after the officer provided security for him. Yet, for all his generosity, he seemed to struggle with his own worth. And one line he sang puts that struggle in sharp focus. "Who am I, that the King of all kings would care to know my name?" This comes from the song Who Am I? He recorded it in 1969, a year after his 68 comeback special. He was back on top of the world. He was a king again, but the song isn't a victory lap. It's a moment of profound, almost painful humility. It's a question from a man looking in the mirror and not recognizing the icon staring back. Think about it. By 1969, his name was one of the most famous on the planet. Everyone knew his name, but he sings this line as if he's a nobody. "Would care to know my name?" It suggests a deep-seated insecurity, a feeling that the private man, Vernon Presley's boy, was insignificant compared to the public persona of Elvis. His life was a whirlwind of contradictions. He was surrounded by the Memphis Mafia, a group of loyal friends and employees who were with him 24/7. Yet, many of them, like his cousin Billy Smith, said he was the loneliest person they'd ever known. He had millions of fans screaming his name, but he sang a song wondering if the one being he truly believed in would even bother to know it. The recording session for this song was part of the legendary American Sound Studio sessions in Memphis. This was the same period he recorded Suspicious Minds and In the Ghetto. He was raw. He was real again after years of bad Hollywood movies. And in the middle of all that career reviving rock and soul, he cuts this track. A quiet, desperate question. It wasn't just a performance. This was the stuff he sang off stage. This was the music he turned to when the cameras were off. J.D. Sumner, the gospel bass singer, who became a close friend, said that Elvis would often call him in the middle of the night just to talk or to sing a gospel song over the phone. He wasn't calling to celebrate his fame. He was calling to connect with something that felt more real. He was asking, through these songs, if he was still worthy of grace, if the boy from the shotgun shack was still in there, and if that boy was enough. Number 18, did he ever truly feel at home? Elvis Presley was only 22 years old when he bought Graceland in 1957. The price was $102,500. He moved his parents in and filled it with friends. It was supposed to be his fortress, his sanctuary, but even there, inside the famous music gates, he was restless. He would constantly redecorate rooms, sometimes overnight, searching for a comfort that always seemed just out of reach. There's a line from a gospel standard he loved, one his mother Gladys asked him to sing, that captures this feeling perfectly. "This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through." He first performed this song, Peace in the Valley, on The Ed Sullivan Show on January 6, 1957. It was his third and final appearance. After the controversy of his hip swiveling, the network had decided to film him only from the waist up. But Elvis didn't come out swinging. He didn't try to be rebellious. Instead, he stood there in front of the biggest television audience in America and sang a quiet hymn for his mama. It was a stunning move. He was the king of a new, dangerous kind of music, and he used his platform to sing about finding a home somewhere else, somewhere beyond this world. The line, "I'm just a passing through," speaks to a profound sense of alienation. It's the feeling of being an outsider. And wasn't he always an outsider? He was a poor country boy who became richer than a king. He was a truck driver who became a Hollywood star. He was a white kid from Mississippi who sang black music and changed the world. He never truly fit into any of the boxes people tried to put him in. In Hollywood, he was seen as a novelty. In the music industry, he was a commodity. At Graceland, he was the boss, the provider, the center of everyone's universe. But that's a lonely position to be in. He created a bubble around himself with his friends, but it was a bubble designed to keep the world out. He was a prisoner in his own home. When he sang, "This world is not my home," he wasn't just repeating an old gospel lyric. He was describing his own life. He had a mansion, but did he have a home? He had a kingdom, but did he have a place where he could just be Elvis, not the king? The song offered an answer. His treasures were laid up somewhere beyond the blue. He was looking for a home that wasn't on any map. A final piece he couldn't find in Memphis. Number 17, was he haunted by the brother he never met? On January 8th, 1935, in a two-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi, Gladys Presley gave birth to twins. The first, Jesse Garon, was stillborn. 35 minutes later, Elvis Aaron was born. He grew up as an only child, but he always felt the presence of the brother he lost. Some family members said he would talk to Jesse in his room at night as a boy. He carried that loss with him his entire life. And you can hear the shadow of that loss in a line from Known Only to Him. It says, "The secret of the soul that never has been told is known only to him." You know, this isn't one of his more famous gospel recordings, but it's one of the most revealing. He recorded it for his first gospel album, His Hand in Mine, in 1960. He had just returned from the army. His mother had died while he was in Germany. He was at a crossroads, a different man than the wild kid who had left. The line speaks of a secret part of the soul, a place no one else can see or understand. For Elvis, what could be more secret, more foundational than being the surviving twin? It's a unique kind of loneliness, to come into the world with someone else and then to walk it alone. It shaped him, it fueled his desire to have people around him always. It contributed to an emptiness that fame and money could never fill. He felt a deep connection to Jesse. He visited his unmarked grave often. He felt, as some twins do, that a part of him was missing. That secret part of his soul, the part that was supposed to be shared with his brother, was a space that remained empty. No friend, no lover, no fan could ever touch it. When he sings that this secret never has been told, it's heartbreaking. He was one of the most public figures in history. People wrote books about him, took pictures of him, analyzed his every move. But the central defining fact of his birth, the secret of the missing half of his soul, was something he couldn't fully share. It was known only to him, and, as the song says, to God. This line reveals a man who, despite living his life in a spotlight, kept a core part of himself completely private. A part defined by grief, a part that was formed in the first 35 minutes of his life, and that secret sorrow echoes through the gentle, mournful way he delivers this gospel truth. Number 16, did he fear his own power? Elvis's voice was a force of nature. In the studio, engineers had to invent new techniques to capture it. His vocal range was stunning, from a growling bass to a pure, soaring tenor. He could command a stadium of 20,000 people with a whisper. He knew the power he had, and sometimes it seemed to frighten him. There's a lyric in Somebody Bigger Than You and I that feels like a plea for humility, a check on his own immense influence. Who makes the sun shine on a cloudy day? Who makes the flowers bloom in the month of May? Somebody bigger than you and I. He recorded this song in 1966 for his second gospel album, How Great Thou Art. This was a strange time for him. He was deep into his Hollywood movie era, making films that he mostly hated. The music was often weak, a shadow of his 1950s glory. The Beatles and the British invasion had changed the landscape. For the first time, Elvis wasn't the center of the musical universe. So he retreated. He went back to the music that centered him, gospel. And in this song, he's actively diminishing his own importance. It's a reminder, perhaps, to himself more than anyone else, that he is not the one in control. He might be the king, but there is a higher power. Think about the life he was living. He could snap his fingers and have anything he wanted. a new car, a private jet, a movie role. He was surrounded by people who said yes to his every whim. That kind of power is dangerous. It can make you believe you are the center of everything. It can make you feel like a god. This song is the antidote to that. It's a simple, direct statement of faith that puts human power in its place. He didn't write the words, but the way he sings them is what matters. There's no arrogance, there's a genuine reverence. He's taking himself out of the equation. He's not Elvis the superstar. He's just a man, acknowledging the source of all real power. It's as if he needed to sing these words to keep himself grounded. To remind the man who could buy and sell anything that he couldn't make the sun shine or the flowers bloom. In a life of total, overwhelming excess and control, this song was his anchor. It was a recognition that true strength didn't come from him, but from something and someone much, much bigger. And number 15, was he begging for a way out? By the mid-1970s, Elvis was in a physical and emotional decline. He was overweight, isolated, and heavily dependent on prescription drugs. His live performances, while still powerful, were sometimes erratic. He was trapped in a grueling schedule of Las Vegas residencies and national tours. He was exhausted, and in the middle of all that, he sang a line that sounds like a desperate cry for help. It's from Take My Hand, Precious Lord, a song he had sung all his life. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. He recorded a beautiful version in 1957, but the line took on a heavier meaning when he sang it in his later years. This wasn't a theological statement anymore, it was a literal description of his life. He was tired, he was weak, he was worn. The song was written by Thomas Dorsey, often called the father of black gospel music. He wrote it in 1932 after his wife and newborn son died in childbirth. It was born from the deepest imaginable grief and despair. Elvis, who had lost his own mother, connected with that pain. But in the 70s, the pain was different. It wasn't just grief, it was the crushing weight of being Elvis Presley, the pressure to perform, the inability to have a normal life. The physical toll of the jumpsuits, the karate moves, the pills. He was burning out. His friends, like bodyguard Red West, saw it up close. They saw the fatigue behind the smile. They saw the effort it took just to get on stage some nights. When he sang, I am tired, I am weak, I am worn, he was giving a report from the front lines of his own battle. He needed a guide, he needed someone to lead me on. His own judgment was clouded. He was surrounded by people who enabled his worst habits because they depended on him for their livelihood. He was the boss, so no one could truly tell him no. He was isolated at the top, so he turned to this song. He turned to the Precious Lord. It was the only authority figure he had left, the only one he could appeal to for help. This wasn't just a song anymore, it was a prayer from a man who knew he was losing his way, a man who felt himself stumbling in the dark and was desperately reaching for a hand to hold. Number 14, did he feel like he had nowhere else to turn? Elvis had a temper. He also had a deep well of generosity. He could be kind and cruel, often in the same day. He was a man of extremes. When he was lost in his own emotional storms, when he had pushed people away or felt betrayed, the world must have seemed like a very small, lonely place. A line he sang over and over in private jam sessions and on his gospel records seems to map out that lonely place. Where could I go? Oh, where could I go? Seeking a refuge for my soul. Where could I go but to the Lord? He recorded Where Could I Go But to the Lord for the How Great Thou Art album in 1966. The song paints a picture of a man who has exhausted all other options. Friends may fail him, earthly comforts are temporary, when all else is gone, what is left? This question must have been very real for Elvis. He had more friends, money, and comforts than anyone could imagine. But did they bring him refuge? His friends were also his employees, which complicated every relationship. His money bought him isolation as much as it bought him pleasure. His homes became prisons. The song structures a series of questions that all lead to the same answer. It's a process of elimination. Can I count on my neighbors? Not always. Can I count on my family? They have their own troubles. The world is a place of shifting sands. The only solid ground is faith. This resonated with Elvis's own experience. He had seen the dark side of human nature. He had been used and exploited. He had seen friendships break under the strain of his fame. In his moments of paranoia and despair, he must have felt like there was no one he could fully trust. The way he sings the line is key. It's not triumphant. It's weary. It's the sound of a man who has looked everywhere else for peace and found nothing. It's a conclusion reached after a long and painful search. He's not going to the Lord as his first choice, but as his last and only resort. For a man who had the world at his feet, this is a stunning admission. It says that everything the world offered him, wealth, fame, love, friendship, was ultimately not enough to provide a true refuge for his soul. When the walls closed in, there was only one direction left to look. Number 13, how deep was his regret? Elvis made mistakes. He knew it. He hurt people he loved. He drifted from the simple, faith-filled life of his childhood into a world of Hollywood excess and spiritual confusion. He spent years searching for answers in numerology, esoteric books, and different philosophies, always circling back to the gospel he learned as a boy. And a single line from the hymn, "I'm gonna walk dem golden stairs," lays his regret bare. I was a fool to wander and stray, straight is the gate and narrow the way. He sang this with a palpable joy as part of a medley on his 1960 album, His Hand in Mine. The song is upbeat, a celebration of redemption. But this one line is a confession. Before you can celebrate being found, you have to admit that you were lost. The phrase, "a fool to wander and stray," is powerful. He wasn't blaming anyone else. He wasn't making excuses. It was an admission of personal failure. He saw the path he was supposed to be on, the narrow way, and he knew he had left it. Think of his life in the late 50s and 60s. After his mother died in 1958, a part of him was unmoored. He went into the army, then straight to Hollywood. He made a string of forgettable movies with formulaic plots and mediocre songs. He was disconnected from the raw, rebellious music that made him famous. He was living a life that looked glamorous on the outside, but was creatively and spiritually empty. He was wandering. This line is a look back at that period and perhaps at other times in his life when he felt he had lost his way. The gospel music was his way of finding the path again. The recording sessions for His Hand in Mine were a homecoming. He was back in Nashville singing the songs he loved with the Jordanaires, the vocal group that had been with him through the early years. It was a reset. By singing "I Was a Fool," he was acknowledging his mistakes. He was closing a chapter. The joy in the rest of the song comes from the relief of that confession, the relief of knowing that even after wandering, there was still a path back. A narrow way, but a way nonetheless. It's a line full of regret, but it's also full of hope. The hope that it's never too late to turn around and go home. Number 12, did he doubt he could bear his own burdens? From the outside, Elvis seemed to have superhuman strength. He endured the death of his mother, the chaos of global fame, the pressures of an insane work schedule. But privately, the burdens he carried were immense. The responsibility for his entire family and entourage, the loneliness of his position, the constant battle with his own demons. There's a line in the gospel song, "He knows just how much we can bear," that feels less like a statement of faith and more like a desperate question. He knows just how much we can bear. But does he? Can I really handle this? He recorded this for the His Hand in Mine album. The song is meant to be comforting. It's a promise that God will not give you more than you can handle. But for someone who feels like they are at their breaking point, that promise can feel very distant. Elvis was a worrier. He was prone to deep bouts of anxiety and depression. His cousin Billy Smith, who lived at Graceland with his family, said Elvis would often talk late into the night about his fears. Fear of losing his career, fear of getting old, fear of being alone. He carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. In the 1970s, that weight became visibly heavier. His health declined. His reliance on prescription medication grew. He was trying to bear the unbearable, the constant touring, the demands of his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, the deterioration of his body. He was pushing himself past his limits. When he sang, "He knows just how much we can bear," Was he finding comfort in it, or was he testing it? Was he holding up his own life against that lyric and wondering if it was really true? The sentiment is that our burdens are measured and tailored to our strength. But what if you feel like your strength has run out? What if the burden feels impossibly, cruelly large? The gentle, almost fragile way he sings it suggests a man holding on by a thread. It's a quiet prayer that the promise is true. A hope that there is a limit. A hope that the breaking point will not be reached. For a man who is expected to be a rock for so many others, this line is a quiet admission of his own fragility. It's the sound of a man wondering just how much more he can take. Number 11 was his life's purpose simply to help others. Elvis was famous for his generosity. He gave away cars, houses, and cash. But it wasn't just about the grand gestures. He felt a deep, driving need to ease the suffering of others. Maybe it was a way of dealing with his own pain. If he could fix someone else's problem, perhaps his own would feel smaller. A line from a song he cherished sums up this personal mission. If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living shall not be in vain. This is from the song If I Can Help Somebody. Mahalia Jackson, the queen of gospel, had a famous version, and it was a song Elvis deeply admired. He never released a studio version, but he sang it often in his private moments. It was a core piece of his personal philosophy, this idea of a life's purpose being tied to service is a powerful one. For Elvis, a man whose life was so much about receiving applause, receiving adoration, receiving money, this was a way to rebalance the scales. His life couldn't just be about being Elvis, it had to mean something more. The line is a bargain. It's a deal being made with God or with fate. If I can do this one thing, if I can ease someone's burden, then it all matters. Then the circus of my life has a point. It's a search for meaning beyond the gold records and the box office receipts. His friends and family saw this in action constantly. He paid for hospital bills. He supported charities, often anonymously. He once heard that a Memphis judge he admired was struggling financially, so he paid off the man's mortgage. These acts weren't for publicity. They were a fundamental part of who he was. Why? Maybe it was rooted in his own impoverished childhood. He knew what it was like to have nothing. He never forgot the feeling of want, the shame of poverty. When he finally had the means, he seemed driven to erase that feeling for others. But maybe it was also something deeper. In the chaotic, often meaningless world of superstardom, helping someone was a concrete, real, and good thing. It was an anchor in a sea of unreality. Like, singing this line wasn't an act, it was a mantra, a reminder to himself of what truly mattered. A way to ensure that when it was all over, his life would not have been in vain. Number 10 was he constantly reliving his sins. Elvis was raised in the Assembly of God Church, a Pentecostal faith with a strong emphasis on sin and redemption. He carried a sense of right and wrong with him his whole life, and a deep-seated guilt when he fell short of his own moral standards. He was a deeply spiritual man living a very worldly life, and the conflict tore him apart. You can hear that conflict in a line from It Is No Secret What God Can Do. The line is, there is no sinner that he can't save. On the surface, it's a message of pure hope. But think about why someone would need to hear that message, why they would cling to it. You only need to be reassured that any sinner can be saved if you fear that you are that one sinner who is beyond saving. He recorded the song in 1957. He was 22 years old, the biggest star in the world, and already being condemned by preachers and moralists across the country. They called his music sinful, his performances degenerate. He was being told publicly that he was a bad influence, a corrupting force. Imagine being that young and carrying that judgment. He believed in God, he believed in sin, and the world was telling him that he was the embodiment of it. He must have wrestled with that. Was he doing the devil's work? Was his music leading people astray? This song is his answer to that. It's a defiant declaration of faith. But beneath the defiance, there's a tremor of fear. He sings it with a conviction that feels like he's trying to convince himself as much as the listener. As his life went on, the list of his perceived sins grew longer in his own mind. His failed marriage, and his distance from his daughter Lisa Marie, his reliance on prescription drugs, his temper. He was a man who knew his own failings intimately. Kathy Westmoreland, a soprano who sang backup for him in the 70s, said he would often be up all night reading the Bible, trying to find peace. He was on a constant search for forgiveness. So when he sang, "There is no sinner that he can't save," he was talking about himself. He was the sinner in the song. He was the one who needed saving. It was a plea for grace, a hope that despite all his mistakes, despite how far he had strayed, the door to redemption was still open. Number 9. Did he see his mother in every hymn? Gladys Presley died on August 14th, 1958. Elvis was 23 and stationed with the U.S. Army in Germany. He was granted emergency leave to fly home, but he was too late. He was devastated. He wailed uncontrollably at her funeral. Many people close to him said he never truly recovered from her death. She was his anchor, his biggest fan, and the source of his spiritual life. And so many of the gospel songs he sang were threaded with her memory. A line from Known Only to Him feels like it could be about his conversations with her, now carried on only in his heart. The burden of the heart, that tear drops when they start, is known only to him. This speaks of a private grief, a sorrow that can't be fully shared. After Gladys died, Elvis's grief was very public. The photos of him weeping over her casket are heartbreaking. But the daily grinding reality of that loss was something he carried alone. She was the one who took him to church. She was the one who loved the sound of his voice when he sang hymns. When he sang gospel, he was connecting with her. He was going back to the safest place he had ever known, his mother's side. The line talks about the burden of the heart. His mother's death was a burden he carried for the rest of his life. Friends said he would talk about her constantly, as if she were still there. He kept her room at Graceland just as she had left it. He was a superstar, a king, but in his heart, he was still Gladys's boy. The tear drops when they start part is so specific. It's not about public mourning. It's about those quiet moments late at night when the memory hits and the tears come without warning. No one sees it. No one knows the depth of the pain in that moment. It's a secret conversation between a man and his sorrow. By singing this line, he was giving voice to that secret pain. He was acknowledging that there was a part of his grief that was inaccessible to anyone else. It was between him and his God, and in a way, it was between him and Gladys. The gospel music was his direct line to her. It was the language they shared, a language of faith and love that death could not silence. Number 8, was he afraid of the dark? Elvis was famous for turning night into day. At Graceland, he and his entourage would sleep all day and stay up all night, watching movies, riding golf carts, and talking for hours. He seemed to be running from something. Maybe he was running from the quiet, from the stillness, from the moment when he would be left alone with his own thoughts. A line from Take My Hand, Precious Lord, captures this feeling of being lost in the darkness. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. This is a prayer from someone who does not want to be left alone when the sun goes down. It's a plea for guidance through a period of fear and uncertainty. For Elvis, the night was not just a time of day, it was a state of being. His insomnia was legendary. He had trouble sleeping since he was a child. As an adult, it was compounded by the pressures of his career and his growing dependence on sleeping pills and other medications. The night was a time of anxiety. The storm in the lyric could represent so many things in his life. The storm of fame, the storm of his chaotic personal life, the internal storm of his spiritual conflicts. He was a man in a perpetual hurricane, and he was looking for a lighthouse. The plea to be led on to the light is so poignant. The light represents safety, peace, clarity, and salvation. It's everything he seemed to be searching for. His life was lived under the artificial lights of the stage and the movie set. But that's not the kind of light this song is about. This is about an inner light, a spiritual dawn. Think about him, alone in his bedroom at Graceland at 4 a.m., the television on but his mind racing. He's surrounded by luxury, but he feels lost. He's a prisoner of his own fame. He can't just go for a walk. He can't escape. The night is a cage. In those moments, this song would have been more than just words. It would have been a lifeline, a desperate call into the darkness, hoping for a hand to come and lead him through the long, lonely hours until the morning. Number 7, did he believe his voice was a gift from God? Elvis never learned to read music. He played by ear. His musical genius was intuitive, a natural force that he didn't fully understand, but knew how to control. He saw it not as his own creation, but as something that was given to him, a gift and a responsibility. There's a powerful line in He Touched Me that describes this feeling of being a vessel for something greater. He touched me. Oh, he touched me. And oh, the joy that floods my soul. Something happened, and now I know. He touched me and made me whole. He won his second of 3 Grammy Awards for the album He Touched Me in 1972. The title track is a song of transformation. It's about a moment of divine intervention that changes everything. For Elvis, this could be seen as the moment he discovered his voice, his talent. He didn't decide to become a singer in the way someone decides on a career. It was a compulsion. It was something he had to do. The story of him going to Sun Records in 1953 to record a song for his mother is famous. He was just a shy kid, but when he opened his mouth to sing, something happened. Sam Phillips, the producer at Sun, heard it. The world heard it. The line "something happened and now I know" perfectly captures the mysterious nature of that talent. He couldn't explain it, it was just there. It was a touch from a higher power, and it made him whole. This is a key idea. Before the music, he was just a poor kid from Tupelo, adrift, driving a truck. The music gave him an identity. It gave him a purpose. It completed him. In that sense, it truly did make him whole, but the gift was also a burden. If your talent comes from God, you have a duty to use it correctly. This likely fueled his spiritual conflict. Was he using this divine gift for good when he was singing Hound Dog and causing a cultural uproar? The gospel music was his way of returning the gift to its source. It was his way of saying thank you. It was his way of using the voice he'd been given for its original intended purpose to praise. Number 6, could he forgive himself? For a man who believed so deeply in grace, Elvis seemed to have a very hard time extending that grace to himself. He was haunted by his failures. He would obsess over a bad performance or a personal mistake. He held himself to an impossible standard. And a line from Amazing Grace speaks directly to the heart of this struggle. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. This is one of the most famous hymns ever written, but when Elvis sang it, the word wretch carried a special weight. He recorded it for the He Touched Me album. His voice is deep, solemn, and full of a profound weariness. He isn't just singing a song, he's giving a testimony. To call yourself a wretch is a powerful act of self-condemnation. It means you see yourself as miserable, unhappy, and unfortunate. It's a word full of shame, and it suggests that Elvis saw a deep brokenness inside himself. Where did this feeling come from? It was a combination of his religious upbringing, his personal regrets, and the immense pressure he was under. He had failed in his marriage to Priscilla. He felt he wasn't a good enough father to Lisa Marie because of his touring schedule. He was ashamed of his dependence on medication. He saw the perfect image the world had of him and knew the messy reality underneath. He felt like a fraud, a wretch in a king's costume. But the line doesn't end there. It's about being saved. The Amazing Grace is the miracle. It's the idea that even a wretch, even someone who has made a total mess of their life, is worthy of being saved. This is the concept he clung to. It was a constant battle for him. The part of him that felt like a wretch was always at war with the part of him that believed in grace. The gospel music was the battlefield. When he sang this line, he was choosing to believe in grace. He was choosing to believe that forgiveness was possible even for him. It was a choice he had to make over and over again, every single day. Number 5, was he searching for a father he could trust? Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, was a complex figure in his life. Elvis loved him and provided for him, but their relationship was not always easy. Vernon spent time in prison when Elvis was a child. Later, he managed Elvis's finances, but he was a cautious, often pessimistic man who didn't always understand his son's creative or spiritual needs. And Elvis was, in many ways, the father figure in his own family from a young age. He seemed to be searching for a different kind of father, a perfect, reliable one. You can hear this search in a line from "There is a God." It's a simple, direct statement, a father who watches over you and me. He never made a formal studio recording of this song, but it was one he loved. It was written by J.D. Sumner, his friend and the leader of the Stamps Quartet. The song is a straightforward argument for the existence of God, but for Elvis, the emphasis on a father who is always watching, always there, was likely the most important part. His own father was not always there. His earthly father had failed him. This created a void. Elvis was looking for an ultimate authority, a source of unconditional love and protection that he may have felt was missing in his own life. This idea of a divine father figure also gave him a sense of order in a chaotic world. His life was unpredictable. His moods were volatile. But the father in this song was constant. He was a rock, a source of stability that Elvis desperately craved. It also speaks to a need for guidance. Elvis was the boss. Everyone looked to him for answers, but who did he look to? He couldn't show weakness to the men who worked for him. He couldn't burden his family with his deepest fears. So he turned to his faith. He turned to the idea of a heavenly father who could handle the weight of his worries. When he sang this line, he was comforting himself. He was reminding himself that he was not alone, that even if he felt like a lost child, there was a father watching over him, a perfect father who would never let him down. Number 4, did he know his time was running out? In his final years, Elvis was preoccupied with death. He read books about the afterlife. He talked to his friends about what might come next. He was in poor health, and on some level, he must have known that his body was failing him. There's a chillingly prophetic line in a song he recorded for his last studio album, Moody Blue. The song is Way Down, a rock and roll number, but deep in his catalog is a gospel song with a line that echoes the same sentiment with more spiritual weight. The song is An Evening Prayer, and the line is, "If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take." This is, of course, part of a traditional children's bedtime prayer, but hearing it sung by a grown man, a man in his 40s, who was living on the edge, gives it a haunting new meaning. It's no longer just a child's recitation. It's a real, immediate possibility. He recorded an evening prayer in 1971. He was still in good physical shape then, but the seeds of his decline had been sown. The song itself is a plea for protection through the night, a request for forgiveness for the day's sins, and a preparation for a sudden end. The line, "If I should die before I wake," acknowledges the fragility of life. It's an admission that each night can be the last. For Elvis, whose lifestyle was so extreme, whose use of prescription drugs was so dangerous, this was not a distant, abstract idea. It was a nightly risk. Dr. George Nicopolis, his personal physician, said that Elvis had a number of serious health problems that he hid from the public. He was not just a man who overindulged, he was a man who was genuinely sick. He likely felt his own mortality more keenly than anyone knew. This prayer is a final surrender. It's an act of placing one's ultimate fate in a higher power's hands. After a day of being the king, of being in control of his own universe, this was a moment of total vulnerability. It was an acknowledgement that he was not in control of his own life and death. It's the sound of a man facing the darkness and preparing for the possibility that he might not see the morning. Number 3, was he tired of the show? For 20 years, Elvis Presley put on a show. He was the shy kid who became a swaggering rock star. He was the humble boy who became a Hollywood actor. He was the man in the jumpsuit, a living superhero. But it was a role, and by the end he seemed deeply tired of playing the part. A line from "Where no one stands alone" seems to capture this weariness, this longing to drop the act. "Once I stood in the night, with my head bowed low, in the darkness as black as could be, and my heart felt alone, and I cried, 'O Lord, don't hide your face from me.'" He recorded this powerful ballad in 1966. It tells a story of hitting rock bottom, of a moment of total despair in the darkness. With my head bowed low is an image of defeat and surrender. It's the opposite of the proud, head-high stance of Elvis on stage. This is a confession of weakness. It's a description of a moment when the mask came off. The phrase, "my heart felt alone," is devastating, coming from someone who was rarely, if ever, physically alone. It shows that being surrounded by people is not the same as having true connection. He was lonely in a crowd. The most desperate part of the line is the cry, "Don't hide your face from me." It's a plea from someone who feels abandoned. In his darkest moments, when he felt most alone, he also felt a spiritual distance. He felt that even God had turned away. This is the ultimate fear for a believer. Not just to be alone in the world, but to be alone in the universe. This song gave him a way to talk about the depression and fear that he couldn't show his fans. The stage Elvis was all power and charisma. The man in this song is broken. By singing it, he was able to be vulnerable, to be human. He was able to admit that sometimes the weight of the crown was too much, and he just wanted to bow his head in the darkness and ask for help. Number 2, did he long for an end to all pain? Elvis lived with chronic pain for much of his later life. He suffered from glaucoma, which caused severe eye pain, as well as a host of other ailments. This was a major reason for his dependence on painkillers. His emotional pain from his divorce and his isolation was just as severe. He was a man in constant, deep hurt, and so a line from a gospel song about heaven takes on a deeply personal meaning. It's from "I'll Fly Away," but a similar sentiment is in many of the hymns he sang. Let's focus on a line from "Peace in the Valley." "There will be no sadness, no sorrow, no trouble I see. There will be peace in the valley for me." This is not just a description of the afterlife. It is a list of everything he wanted to escape from. No sadness, no sorrow, no trouble. He was describing his daily life by listing its opposites. His life was filled with sadness. The loss of his mother, the end of his marriage, the distance from his own child. It was filled with sorrow. The regret for his own mistakes. The knowledge that he was trapped by his fame. And it was filled with trouble. The constant lawsuits, the health problems, the pressures of his career. The song paints a picture of a place of perfect tranquility. Peace in the valley. For a man whose life was a constant mountain peak of excitement and a deep valley of despair, the idea of a gentle, peaceful, level place must have been incredibly appealing. He wasn't just singing about going to heaven when he died. He was singing about a desire for the pain to stop right now. It was a form of escapism. If he couldn't find peace in his mansion, in his career, or in his relationships, he could find it in a song. For 3 minutes, he could imagine a world without hurt. The way he sings these lines is often with a sense of deep longing. It's a gentle, hopeful sound, but it's born from a place of deep suffering. It's the sound of a man who is tired of fighting, tired of hurting, and just wants to rest. The valley was not a place of death. It was a place of release. Number 1, what was his final prayer? On the night of August 15th, 1977, just hours before he died, Elvis was at the piano in Graceland. He was with his cousin Billy Smith and his girlfriend Ginger Alden. He couldn't sleep. He sat down and played a few songs. The last song he ever sang was a gospel number, "Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain." While not strictly gospel, it's a song of loss and hope. But a song he recorded years earlier feels like his true last testament, a summary of his entire spiritual journey. The song is "Stand By Me," and the line is a question that encompasses all his fear and all his faith. "When the world is tossing me, like a ship upon the sea, thou who rulest wind and water, stand by me." He recorded this in 1966. It's a simple hymn, a direct plea for support, but it perfectly describes the central turmoil of his life. He was a man being tossed by the world, the winds of fame, the waves of adoration, the storms of his personal life. He was a ship, often without a rudder, on a vast and violent sea. The line acknowledges a powerlessness. He is not in control of the ship. He is being tossed. This is a crucial admission for a man who controlled every aspect of his environment. He knew on a deeper level that he was at the mercy of forces bigger than himself. And so he appeals to an even higher power, thou who rulest wind and water. He's not asking for the storm to stop. He's not asking for the sea to become calm. He is asking for a presence in the middle of the storm. Just stand by me. Don't leave me alone while I'm going through this. This is the prayer of a man who has given up on finding a perfect life. He knows the storms will come. He knows the world will toss him around. The only hope is to have a divine companion through it all. This was the essence of his faith. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about having someone to lean on when he was imperfect. And it wasn't about avoiding trouble. It was about having someone to stand with him in the middle of it. In the end, after all the rock and roll, the movies, all the fame, and all the madness, it came down to this simple, desperate, and beautiful plea. A plea from a scared boy from Tupelo, a lonely king in his castle, a man on a stormy sea, asking for someone, anyone, to just stand by him.